Well, hey, Three Crosses family, welcome back to the Going Deeper podcast. My name is AJ. I oversee life groups and discipleship. And man, we are excited to have a conversation walking through the events of Holy Week. And so we're going to be walking day by day. There's a lot of scriptures to get to today. If you're following along at home, you can turn to Matthew 21. That's where we'll start. But we are going to walk through the events of Holy Week all the way up until Good Friday. This is a big week, and there's a lot going on at Three Crosses. So let's fill you in before we get into the conversation. Good Friday service is one of the most powerful services. I'd encourage you to check it out. You can go to our main webpage, threecrosses.church, or threecrosses.church/Easter, and you'll find that the Good Friday service is at 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock on Friday, we'd love to see you there. Then the weekend hits, and we are introducing a Saturday service for this Easter go around. And so if you're looking to go to a service on Saturday, that is at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock on Saturday. And then Sunday, we're going to have a sunrise service at 6 o'clock a.m. And then your normal times. So 8 o'clock, 9:30, 11, and then a 1 o'clock at Espanol. And so a busy weekend. Invite your family, invite your friends. You can find out more at threecrosses.church. And so we have an awesome conversation about Holy Week. If you've never walked through these events of this week, it's just a really good one. There's also devotionals that we provided for you. And so we are excited. With that, let's go deeper. Joining us to walk through the events of Holy Week, Pastor Danny. Pastor Danny, welcome to Holy Week.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm
Palm
excited.
Sunday all the way through this entire week, landing on Good Friday. It's a powerful week. There's a lot to walk through today.
And there's a lot of, every day in Holy Week has a different little name. I feel like most people don't know about the events of Holy Week. I was in a meeting last week and I talked about Spy Wednesday, which is when Judas agrees to hand over Jesus. And everybody looked at me like they never heard that phrase before. I'm like, oh man, we got to do some educating around the events of Holy Week.
Yeah. And so you gave us a couple of different resources. I know in the sermon you had the outline of all the days and the passages you can go to. You also wrote daily devotionals, which are awesome. They're going to be on our website, on our app. And so I'd encourage you to jump in. So you're going to get a chance to walk through Holy Week yourself in so many different ways. I'm curious. I mean, every Easter, we go through these events all the time. And so it's a passage and set of passages that we constantly go back toward. I'm interested in this go-around, like this year, this particular season of life. You go back to the Holy Week events. What stood out to you? Like what angle really stood out in terms of looking at the scriptures this go around? Because I know every time you go back to the scriptures, whether they're the same ones, like something new emerges. So what would that be?
Yeah, it's interesting to have that rhythm with Christmas and Easter each year where you come back to real familiar narratives.
Yeah.
And, you know, on one hand, you just preach the narrative. On the other hand, though, it's interesting that the Lord is faithful that every time I sit down and read these passages fresh each year, I get some sort of question that I'm wondering about that I've never really investigated before. And so, for some reason this year, as I was reading through the Palm Sunday triumphal entry narrative, I just kept thinking, man, how did that week go for those people who were there on Palm Sunday? There's all these folks with palm branches, Hosanna in the highest, waving these things, worshiping Jesus. But then by Friday, there's nobody there. It's like a few women and John at the cross on Good Friday. Where did all the crowds go? Are these the same people who are yelling, crucify him at the trial, or are these different people? And so I'd never really wondered about those things before. And so my exploration to answer those questions ended up kind of just uncovering kind of the events of the week. And it was just a good exercise for me to walk through them. I thought, I'll just take everybody through the events of Holy Week on Palm Sunday.
Yeah, because it's an interesting one. I mean, there's not too much information about the crowd, except for their responses. And then I think even in our conversations, it was interesting to think through, okay, what events of this Holy Week took place in a more public setting and which ones took place in a more private one? And what if you weren't in that private circle? Like what if you were on the outside and then all of a sudden looking at it from afar, it's just like, wow, this is a tough week. So let's dive in we're going to walk day by day through the events here. And again, there's resources that you can check out on our website, on our app, to walk through the scripture specifically. So I'm not going to read through like I typically do, just like verse by verse. I'm just going to give the highlights and then come up with a question. And so the first one, Palm Sunday. And so you brought us to Matthew 21, 1 through 11. And as I was listening to that passage being preached and meditating on it, I was noticing all the small things. And I think when I think about the crowd, from my perspective, I think, man, on this side of things, it's so easy to say like, man, how did you guys miss it? Like, how did you guys miss it? And then as I'm reflecting on the different things, I think like you had said, the Mount of Olives situation is important because of Zechariah. The donkey itself carried a lot of weight. The entrance into Jerusalem, what they were doing, what they were saying. And so help us get into their shoes a little bit, into the crowd. Give them a sort of a favorable read on this. Like what, I mean, if that is warranted, right? Yeah. What made them anticipate a king? Like what made them do what they did? Like, is there any like contextual evidence that helps us understand like what was the gravity of this moment and what were people seeing?
Yeah, what we get is what the gospel authors give us. Right. And so one thing that we get from the gospel authors is the posture of the crowd, right? Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest. And so this is celebration. This is, I always think of remember in Aladdin when Prince Ali comes to town and there's all the parades and everything? Like I picture that. This the pomp and circumstance, palm branches. And I think growing up, when I would read this, like in high school and college as a new Christian, I would always think, man, they didn't get it though. Like because he's coming in on a donkey, he's making a statement. Like they're not noticing it. Yeah. Now as I read it, I think they did get it. I think they understood that Jesus was this Messiah character. This is why he was the Messiah, is the Messiah. But I think they knew that. That's why they were coming to worship him. I think they knew that all of these messianic themes must come true. He's going to come into the holy city, Jerusalem. He's going to come off the Mount of Olives. He's going to ride on a donkey. Mm-hmm. So now as I read it, I don't think that they're picturing him on a war horse and they see the donkey like, that's kind of weird, but whatever, Hosanna in the highest. I think that more like kind of froths them up into this fervor of like, oh my gosh, it's happening, right? He's on a donkey. Like it's just, Jesus is partnering with our interpretation of him and he's leaning into these prophetic words. He is doing what we always knew the Messiah would someday do. Surely this one is the Messiah. I think part of what we need to understand from the context is that as you look at the last 400 years of God's people since Malachi was written, there've been a number of people who've kind of come up as a potential Messiah that kind of rise in popularity, rise in power, and eventually get extinguished. There's even some folks where they have some myths about how they rose from the dead. It's like, wow, but then they never found the person, right? And so they've had all of these like almost messianic people come up. And so I would imagine if you were a skeptic, you'd be standing there thinking like, okay, but we've seen this before. Is this one really the Messiah?
Right.
But the people in the crowd are like, no, I'm telling you, right? And so even doing the research on the passage, one of the interpretations I saw was that some scholars believe that most of this crowd had followed him from his ministry in Galilee, and now they were coming into Jerusalem with him kind of as his accompaniment. And so they had seen him do miracles. They'd seen him feed the 5,000. They'd seen him do all these different things. Yeah. And they're like, I'm telling you, this one is truly the Messiah. This is the one we've been waiting for. He's going to redeem and restore Israel.
Yeah. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about, just the powerful prophecies that you had mentioned in Zechariah. And yeah, if you were studying even the scriptures, like you're seeing all these different things happening. And if you're listening to the teachings, if you're following him and seeing all the healings and you're just like, wow, everything's starting to click. This is crazy. Like, and then, yeah, the only other like king riding on a donkey is Solomon in Kings. And then, yeah, it's kind of interesting looking at the which kingdom angle, right, too? Because I know that's where you kind of went in the message of what is the enemy? Like, what is the enemy that he's going to conquer? And I think was there a lot of like political hopes in that crowd, do you think? Like, was there a lot of like overthrow the Roman government type of vibes going on.
It does seem like from all the New Testament literature and beyond, that was the hope of the Jewish people, was that someday our Messiah would come and overthrow the Roman government. Right? Because we see these glimpses of like the one who sits on the throne in Israel, of his kingdom there will be no end, and he will reign through all the earth, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. So all the imagery is of a king who is enthroned, ruling over everything.
Right.
And so if you're part of this small country in the middle of Roman occupation, right, where now Rome is ruling over all of everything, it's just natural to think, okay, so he's somehow going to come and he's going to upset that power dynamic. And now from Jerusalem, our king will rule over the entire empire, and the Roman Empire will crumble. And so I don't know if they knew how he was going to do that, like gather an army, but I quoted N.T. Wright on Sunday. N.T. Wright's perspective from studying the times is that what people expected when a king rose to power is that they would be recognized as a political force. They would go on some battle, conquer some enemy, ascend some throne, and then began to rule from that throne. So I would guess the people didn't know how it was going to happen, but I would guess that they assumed that at some level Jesus was going to rise to power, and somehow his reign would overthrow all of Rome, and the Jewish people would be on top.
Yeah, and if you're going to establish a kingdom and rule the entire world and the entire place, you got to like handle the major authorities, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even like within Israel, you think of like the Davidic kingdom. Talked about Solomon and David. Like David's kingdom was kind of that description. So like this was this kingdom that was expansive over all of what we see as Israel, and yet there was this picture that from the stump of the root of Jesse, this new kingdom, this new king would emerge. And so he's supposed to come in the spirit and power of David, but have this limitless kingdom to fulfill the promises of Abraham, that all nations will be blessed by you. You will inherit the entire earth, just the land, the seed, the promise, the blessing. So he is big time. He was supposed to be big time in a way that he ended up not going that direction. We'll share what direction he did go, but that's, I would assume, what they were expecting.
Yeah. So let's go into that direction, because, one of the most compelling things that I had just mentioned earlier in the message was, okay, if he's a king and like there's this like expectation that he's going to rule and conquer the nations, it's very interesting to see what he does next, to see who he picks battles with, like who he picks fights with. And so we get into Holy Monday. Is that correct? Holy Monday?
I don't remember what they're all called, but it was...
I think Monday and Tuesday don't really have like
they don't really
set
have
names
in
to
the
them.
same way. Just some stuff happens that is significant.
I think they said, we don't have a good name for Monday, so let's call it Holy.
Sure, Holy Monday. Palm Sunday, Holy Monday.
And so on Holy Monday, you had highlighted that one of the first things that he does is he enters the temple courts. He goes to the temple, straight to the heart of the city, and he overturns the tables. He says, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. And so that is like the highlight of that Monday. Some people have suggested, if you just continue reading, even in that Matthew passage, that those things kind of happened on that same day. So there's a blind and a lame man coming to the temple and healing them. There's children then shouting Hosanna to the Son of David. And then he goes out to Bethany, and then there's this kind of weird scene where he curses a fig tree. Like that, some people have said that this happens on that day as well. So kind of a conglomeration of all sorts of different things. If our focus is, okay, this is a king, we know he's going to conquer somebody, what do these things say about the enemy that he's going after?
Yeah, I would, again, I'm trying to like put myself in the shoes of the people in that day. I don't think they would be floored when Jesus goes after religious hypocrisy.
Right.
I would guess, right, because these are some of the marginalized people who it's like they're being extorted when they go to worship. I think they would recognize that there is a difficult power dynamic between the religious authority and themselves as worshipers of God. Yeah. And so I would guess that as you're watching Jesus do, clear the temple, you're like, okay, well, yeah, you got to take care of our own house first. Like, let's start at home, like clean shop here, and then we'll go take over the world, right? And him healing these folks, it's like he's the Messiah. He's bringing messianic power. This guy's the real deal. Like, we trust him. He curses the fig tree. Then it's kind of like,
yeah, it's like, okay.
He's like, may anyone, what does he say? May you never bear fruit again, or may
you never bear fruit again.
May you never bear fruit again. It's like, man, this is like a symbol of the Israeli people. Like, that's, I don't, that's a little more difficult. And so I think you see this on one hand ramp up of like, oh, the Messiah's getting to work, like first 100 days, like he's wrecking shop, he's cleaning things up. But then he's also making enemies from the religious elite. Like, I hope he knows what he's doing. He curses the fig tree. Like, I don't know what that means, but okay. And so I do feel like I would guess on Monday, there's a primary, like, look at Jesus. He's getting right to work. He is the one we thought he'd be. And at the same time, there's this like, I hope this doesn't turn on him. Like, cause
he's making enemies of the wrong people.
Of people that, you know what, maybe he needs to clean this stuff up, but like, I hope he knows what he's doing is what I keep thinking. If I'm putting myself in the shoes of these people, I hope he doesn't take on too much too quick, because this is a powerful group that he's standing up against. And Jesus obviously has powers. He's doing these miracles and all of that, but he's making some bold claims. And yeah, all right, I hope he knows what he's doing, because he's broken the seal on this week. Here we go. Yeah,
that's very interesting to think about that perspective, because if you think like the kingdom belongs to Israel and like he's going to establish Israel, you'd imagine you're going to need like powerful Israelites, and like the most powerful Israelites of the time were the religious leaders, like the people in the temple, the ones that but it is kind of interesting that he goes and heals the lame, he heals the blind, like he has children shouting it, and it's like, again, going back to the vulnerable, the exposed, the hypocrisy of the entire system, like, and then the fig tree. I haven't quite put two and two together on that one yet, of like, oh, that could be a symbol of like Israel itself. So it's just an interesting, like, yeah, you start to have questions, I suppose, if you're looking from a crowd perspective.
Because he's been pretty long. So you think about Jesus and fig trees, which is its own study, but I think a fig tree is the type of tree that Jesus, when he told that parable about, man, this fig tree is not bearing fruit. And so it's like, hey, don't cut it down. Like, let's dig a trench around it, add some fertilizer. If it bears fruit next year, great. If not, then we'll cut it down. And it's almost like he's like, hey, time's up. Like, you didn't bear the fruit that God called you to bear. I'm about to rip this kingdom away from you and hand it to somebody else, which he'll talk about on Tuesday.
So let's go to Tuesday then, because that's a great transition.
What do you call Tuesday?
Tuesday, I've
also
heard
Holy Tuesday.
I've heard Holy Tuesday.
Holy Tuesday. Okay. When in doubt, holy.
I like Teaching Tuesday.
Teaching
I heard
Tuesday.
Teaching Tuesday was an alternative, and I think we should adopt that. Because
here we go.
On Tuesday, all sorts of different teachings and parables. Like, if you look through Matthew itself, I have a couple of them listed here, all the way to chapter 23. So we're in 21 and we're jumping all the way to 23. You have him talking about John's baptism and questioning the religious leaders, like, where did John's baptism come from? Was it of divine origin? Was it of human origin? And he's like trying to get like his authority established there. You have the story of the two sons, the sons that says, I will not do this, but then does it, or the other son that says, I will do it, but never does it. Like, which one is more faithful? You have the parable of the tenants. And so we'll return to that, because that was our focus for this Sunday. The wedding banquet parable, again, another one saying like, I'm going to reach out to the least of these, and that's who the banquet is going to be for. You have the teaching, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, God to what is God's, which is kind of interesting, of like, my mission is a little bit different than what you might expect, considering the Romans. Teaching about marriage in heaven, which is interesting, like a heavenly kingdom mindset, greatest commandment, love God and love others. I love this one. Who is David talking about when he says, the Lord said to my Lord? It's in there. And then the seven woes. The seven woes. Wow. That is a famous one on that Tuesday, of just like laying it in to the religious leaders. So
yeah, I mean, Teaching Tuesday is fine. And now it's like Define Your Enemy Tuesday, because
Define the Enemy Tuesday. DTR Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like it's, we started this conversation saying, that people probably assumed he was going to go and conquer Rome.
Yeah.
But it's like, he does not seem at all concerned with conquering Rome.
No.
Like, the only time he brings up Rome is should we pay the temple tax, or should we pay the tax to Caesar or not? And it's like,
whatever.
Give it to Caesar what's Caesar's. It's like, he's not even concerned about Rome.
Yeah.
But he's very concerned about the kingdom of God, like the kingdom of God's people. All of his teaching is about, it seems, overthrowing the Jewish religious authority, ripping their kingdom out of their hands. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, right? You neglect the weightier matters of the law. You are those people who say you were going to do it, but you did nothing. Your kingdom will be ripped out from you and handed to another. You put the son to death. Your vineyard will be taken away. Yeah. It's like, may no one ever eat fruit from you ever again. It's like, he's like saying this is the end of the Jewish religious empire. That's like... That's not the enemy we expected, but that's going to make a big enemy right there.
Yeah. And even included on this list too, I didn't even include the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24 and 25. So it extends even further, and that gets into some
it's like the temple being torn down, right?
That's the temple being torn down, sheep and the goat separation.
It's like, what in the world is he doing?
Yeah. So it's heavy stuff. And you emphasize the parable of the tenants, parable of the tenants, which is a very interesting one. It's a very... help us walk through the parable of the tenants, because I know there's a lot of powerful imagery going on here, and it seems like he's communicating something very specific. So help us walk through the parable of the tenants and why you saw the importance of highlighting that.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about fig trees and how they could be a fig tree is a symbol of Israel at some level. The quintessential symbol for the nation of Israel was the vine,
right?
And so he gives this image of, first he's going to tell us later this week, I'm the true vine, but for today, talking about a vineyard that has been planted here on planet Earth that belongs to God. So he's talking about Israel, that is supposed to bear fruit, and God has entrusted it into the hands of servants that he's put in place until he comes back to take over his vineyard. And the whole time he's just walking through, man, these servants got the idea that this kingdom was not a stewardship to be guarded and entrusted to them, but somehow they owned it. And so like prophets would come, and the owner would send these prophets, and the prophets would say, hey, here's how I want you to live. And they're like, we're not listening to you. In fact, they killed the prophets. Then they sent another round of prophets. They killed the other round of prophets. And they got this idea, man, if we can just kill all these messengers, eventually we can have this vineyard to ourselves. Like, it's like, that's an uprising. And so that's when the owner of the vineyard says, well, they haven't listened to any of my prophets, my servants. I'll send my own son to reason with them and share what my wishes are with them. And so they see the son coming, and they're like, well, if we can seize this son and kill this son, then we can have this vineyard. And so they do that. They kill the son of the landowner, and they think that now they own the vineyard, but the moral of the story is like, you wicked tenants, like it's going to be taken away from you, and you're all going to be killed.
And they even identified, like, get rid of those servants, right?
Yeah. And so it's, I think on one hand, it's another in a long list of indictments against the Jewish religious authority, specifically the Jewish religion as it was experienced. But then hidden in that is this idea of like, they're going to kill the son. And so if you're sitting there that week and you're tracking and you know who Jesus claimed to be, I mean, I think on one hand you're like, wow, he's like really going after the Jewish religious authority. He's really going to say he's going to turn it over. But what do they mean they're going to kill the son? Like, who's the son? Like, the prophets, we know who the prophets are. Who's the son? Who's going to get killed? And so we start to get this glimpse that, we know reading that the death of Jesus was not thwarting his plan. This was his plan that he had set forth since the beginning. But we see that over and over again in the gospel accounts, that even his closest disciples couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that his death was part of his ascending to the throne that he would ascend to.
So talk to us a little bit about, I think this is a powerful parable, because now you start to see like how the Jewish religious leaders are almost usurping what they had been given and entrusted. Talk to us about like, what was the like crime, for the lack of a better term,
Yep.
the crime of the religious leaders that like Jesus is so like infuriated with. Like, why does he spend so much time looking at them and saying like, we need to deal with this enemy first?
It's interesting that, so back in the 8th, 7th, 6th century BC, God's people, like all of their sin and misgivings all finally catches up to them, where God's like, you haven't honored me. Your hearts are far from me. You haven't lived out these elements of justice or religious life that I've asked you to live out. And so your kingdom's going to be taken away from you. And so one by one, the southern kingdom at first in the 7th century, and then the northern kingdom in the 6th century falls to Babylon and Assyria. And the people are taken into captivity. Some of them go into Samaria and Syria. Some of them some of them were captured by Assyria and then sent back into the world and kind of lived amongst the nations of the world. And then some were taken into Babylon. They lived in Babylon for 70 years in Babylon. And they came back from Babylon. This is kind of where the Old Testament is starting to wrap up. So they come back from Babylon, and we see them trying to rebuild the city, rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls, kind of build a name for themselves again. And it's like, okay, we're going to build the city, and someday Messiah is going to come back and he's going to rule like David did. We're going to have a resurrection of our empire. And one thing that you asked about what they got wrong. One thing they got wrong is that the Pharisees, who Jesus spent most of his time coming against in this week and beyond, the Pharisees was a party that was birthed during that season. So kind of the last 400 years, 400 to 500 years before Jesus came, the people were like, okay, we're coming back. We're going to rebuild this city. We're coming out of Babylon. But we're not going to mess this thing up again. We're gonna live by the law. We're gonna do what God told us to do this time. And it started out as that's a good thing. We're gonna live by the law, do what God told us to do. The problem is, right, Jesus draws this out and we see this, like they never got to the heart of it. They built this whole legalistic structure because they were terrified of breaking the laws. And so part of it just turned into classic legalism, where like they invented all these laws, hundreds and hundreds of laws, to just trying to protect them from breaking God's law. So like wasn't enough that you don't commit adultery. Now you're not even literally able to look at a woman. Like men have to keep their eyes on the ground when they walk down the street in Jewish law. Women were wearing coverings over their bodies, all these things.
You couldn't even spit on the ground because it was on the Sabbath, because it was considered like planting something.
I love that. Yeah, if you spit on the ground, you might like cause the dirt to separate like you're plowing a field, and so right. So you can't spit, which fine, don't spit. Right, you couldn't walk a certain distance. Right, we know all these rules. They created all these rules. And when Jesus comes, it's like, on one hand, you can make an argument that Jesus hates all these rules, but more than that, I mean, that's the 7 woes is you've made all these rules, but they haven't kept you from breaking the law. You've broken the law. Like you still covet, you still steal, you're still angry. You keep these minute areas of the law, but you've neglected the more important things: justice, mercy, all these things. This is where he turns over the tables in the temple, where it's like, you're so consumed with collecting the temple tax because you want to honor God, but you're exploiting all of these people who can't afford to worship now because of these fees that you're levying. And so the people's hearts, right, they just fell back into the same thing where they honored them with their lips, with God with their lips, but their hearts were far from him. And he's like, this system is not a resurrected, better system of the Old Testament worship. Like, this is worse. This is disgusting. I've asked you to do some things. You haven't done any of those things. I'm going to take this away from you, and I'm going to entrust it in the hands of some new people. And so I do think this is where Jesus is like, this whole religious system needs to be torn to the ground and rebuilt, and it needs a new king. It needs new leadership. It needs a new heart. And you're right. This is like a come to Jesus moment. Literally, like, you guys need to turn this thing around.
Yeah. And I know that the teaching in heaven, or the marriage in heaven teaching, was geared toward the Sadducees too. So there was another party, the Sadducees. What were they up to?
Yeah, Pharisees and Sadducees were just two different. I mean, it's almost like denominations, right? Two different types of religious people who had different vantage points on some key aspects of the scripture. So, right, Jesus' teachings more aligned with the teachings of the Pharisees, who believed in resurrection, who believed in a kingdom, who believed in all these things. The Sadducees just had a different view. They didn't believe in the afterlife. Just like you die, then you die. And so just a religious group that had different views on some religious things. Jesus spent most of his time going after the Pharisees, not the Sadducees, but it was like Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, teachers of the law, all the different elements of this religious system. It just seemed like you guys, the whole thing is poison, man.
And I know there was some element of relationship to the Roman government too in there, of like the Pharisees, because of that fear, wanted nothing to do with it. Like they wanted nothing. And the Sadducees, I believe, are the ones that said, actually, if we're going to see this kingdom grow, we actually need to lean into the worldly systems and lean into the Roman government and the power. And so there was kind of like a tension there between the two parties. So
well, it's interesting to do. Like, I mean, I've never read anything on this, but I'm sure it'd be easy to write something on this. But like there's so many different groups in those days, right? Yeah. So we mentioned Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, teachers of the law. Yeah. There's like the Essenes, which was like a community of folks who really wanted to stay holy and pure.
Qumran community.
The Qumran community.
Just isolated, get themselves out of everything.
So everybody had these different postures of what's the best way to live. And some of them were in relation to Rome. Some of them were in relation to God. Some of them in relation to the religious system, right? The zealots. So we see about these people who were like zealous for overthrowing the Roman government. And so it's interesting to me that in a world where all these different groups existed, who Jesus is primarily picking fights with are not the people who had a relationship with Rome or wanted to overthrow Rome or partner with Rome. It was really just all about like religious leadership, the religious system, like the Pharisees kind of become the core of that, who the scribes, teachers of the law, and the Pharisees, who were kind of the trifecta that ruled the Jewish religious system. And it's just interesting to me that when people are so consumed with the relationship with nation, state, Rome, all that kind of stuff, he never even really comments on this stuff. He's like kind of hand waves the Roman thing away with the give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And he's just like doggedly going after the religious institutional leaders and says, I'm dismantling this chaos that you've built. He seemed like he was only concerned with the core of the religious system, not how it interacts with the Roman system.
Which if you put the Pharisaical lens, it's like, wow, they're really messing with people's hearts. And I think like that is really good evidence. Again, we're looking at it from this side and we can see like all the teachings of Paul, like after the transformation of the heart, the circumcision of the heart, like, but in the moment, you just got to be like, he's making enemies of everybody.
I mean, but you've seen this, like they were head to head, even like in Jesus first starts into ministry in Galilee, goes into the synagogue at Capernaum. He heals a man who's got says the man with the withered hand. And the Pharisees are all up in arms because he did it on the Sabbath. It's like, well, you can't heal somebody on Saturday. It's like, and we read this and it's like, Jesus just like found a guy who's been struggling his whole life. He ran into him. It happened to be a Saturday. He like healed him, restored him. But you're like, no, this guy can't be the real deal because he worked on Saturday. It's like, wait, what? Like, first of all, it didn't seem like that much work. Like he just like with a word, he just restored this guy. On the other hand, like their religious system gave them this interpretation that he can't possibly be the Son of God because he just healed someone on a Saturday. And so on one hand, Jesus deals with logic where he's like, if you had an animal that falls into a pit on a Saturday, wouldn't you help it out? Or you'd be like, sorry, save your life tomorrow. It's like an animal you would do that for. Like, I just helped this guy who'd fallen into a pit for years and it's Saturday, so I'm in trouble. But then more than that, we get to see kind of coming out like just this chasm growing between Jesus, who is the one who created the law, who fulfilled it in every way, who was abiding by it in the way that he lived.
Yeah.
And even though he made all these enemies because they're like, oh no, this guy doesn't follow the law. So it's like, if God himself doesn't follow the law that you've made, you probably made the wrong law. Like it's just, you have made the wrong
Right.
law. And so we see that chasm starting from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I suppose the beautiful thing about this conversation is starting to see the juxtaposition between Jesus, who claimed to fulfill the law, and the life that he lived, versus the Pharisaical guidelines and all that stuff that barred a lot of things, that exploited people, that did everything that we're saying. And it's just like, wow, what a juxtaposition between the two.
And his whole thing is really not trying to nitpick, but just say like, at your core, you guys are wrong. You're wretched.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even one of my, I don't know if favorite's the word, but one of my favorite indictments he brings to the religious authority is he says, you go over land and sea to make a single convert, but you just make them twice the son of hell as yourself. Like your core is wrong. So when you replicate yourself, you're replicating nasty people. Like this is not the religion I designed. You've perverted this thing. It's time to burn it to the ground and start from scratch.
So he's lit a lot of flames under a lot of people.
And this is what he's doing. We talked about public versus private. This is all the stuff he's doing publicly. Like, these are things that people are writing about because everyone's talking about him, because he just walked into one of those public places in Jerusalem and turned the tables over. This is Jesus acting publicly and causing some chaos.
So this is like an eye-opening thing for the crowds. Like, oh man, like this is what this means. This is what this king is all about.
And it seems like they were loving it. Like this is where we find that the Jewish religious leaders are like, we have to get rid of this guy, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
Because like there's going to be a riot on their hands because the people love Jesus. They're like, this stuff is awesome. And so the people that he's advocating for, they see who he is. They see what he's promising. They are thinking about the relief that will come if we could overthrow these crooked religious leaders. And so the religious leaders are like, we got to take this guy down, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
Because he is so loved by the people, like Hosanna in the highest. It's going to be pretty tricky to stop this guy who's growing in momentum while he's growing in his indictment of the religious leadership as well.
Okay. That's very important to know what the crowd's demeanor is right now, because it just makes the week all that more interesting. Because we get to what you alluded to as Spy Wednesday, which is per tradition, Spy Wednesday. And this day we have the woman who comes to Jesus and anoints Jesus with this alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. And it seems like money is on the mind here, because all of a sudden one of his inner circle, Judas, goes out and makes a deal for 30 pieces of silver, which is another prophetic allusion there. He's going to betray him. And I love this angle of like looking on from the crowd, because you see Jesus like making these like strong statements like right off the bat. The first 100 days, we're talking about all these different actions he's doing, all these different teachings that are like in your face, and the crowd's like getting amped up. And it takes one guy, like one bad apple, to just throw a wrench in the plan. And so I suppose the question is, was Jesus really in control here? You know, was he just making enemies to make enemies? Like, how does this, I mean, I can imagine in the crowd, you're saying like, he's lost it. Like he's taken one step too far. And so what would you say to somebody that like looks at these Holy Week events and is a little bit distraught because like these things are happening, and it's like, well, was he really in control?
Yeah. I mean, I think when we look at it from our vantage point, we see that Jesus was absolutely in control because he was working the plan that he had developed since before the foundation of the world. So, and he had talked about publicly that the Son of Man is going to be handed over, crucified. On the third day, he's going to rise again. So he's tried to share this with his disciples. Hasn't shared it too much publicly. The disciples are always kind of pushing back, like, surely not, Lord, this will never happen to you. But we see, even as we go into Wednesday, just on one hand, we see the betrayal of Judas, which if we just saw that, we could be like, man, Jesus was making some momentum, but now he's getting hamstrung by Judas.
In like 3 days.
Yeah. You know? But like at the same time, you see before that, this woman comes and anoints him for his burial at Bethany and worships him. And it's like, oh, he's like he's gonna die. Like that's his plan. So with Judas, it could be easy to be like, oh, well, Judas is just working the plan of God. But then it's like all the language around Satan entering Judas and the betrayal of Judas is like, no, and even Judas taking his own life later. It's like, no, this guy is culpable. Like he is satanic, demonic. This is a terrible thing that he's doing. But Jesus is not out of control at the same time. So this is Judas's fault, but it's also the plan of Jesus. And yeah, the betrayal of Judas is so sad because it's one of his closest friends. But I think that the tension we talked about on Tuesday, where it's like, man, people were loving Jesus. He was gaining momentum. The religious leaders wanted to kill him, but they couldn't figure out how. And Judas is like, well, I can tell you how. Like, I know where he is in the middle of the night when no crowds will see you. Like, we can get this guy extracted from society. I have inside access to Jesus' itinerary, and I can tell you how to get him. Because they couldn't arrest him publicly because there'd be a riot on their hands. So Judas is like, I can tell you how to arrest him privately. And so Judas, the only reason Judas was able to betray Jesus was because he had this inside information from being super close to Jesus that, yeah, for 30 pieces of silver betrays God himself, which, I mean, it just makes it bonkers. He's the one who's flipping out when the woman anoints Jesus at Bethany because he's like, what, this is expensive perfume. You're wasting money. It's like, he cares more about money than he cares about Jesus, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's a fascinating tension in the scriptures. I think of like the famous passage, Genesis 50:20, talking about Joseph's story. And it's like, he lands on the phrase like, you actually meant this to harm me, but God meant it for my good. And it's like this, like, because I know there's a lot of conversation around the Judas event itself. Like, how did somebody in that inner circle become possessed by Satan and then like doing what he did? And yet like God meant it for good because, yeah, like you're saying, like he shared the parable of the tenants. Like he's going to send his son and they're going to kill the son. Like there it is right there. And now all of a sudden he's being anointed. So it's like, it's kind of this beautiful tension, like Judas being culpable and yet God like orchestrating things exactly to the plan. I think there's something really powerful about that. So Spy Wednesday, we get to one of the most well-known names in Holy Week. Maybe not well-known, but interestingly named Maundy Thursday.
Yeah, and I don't know what Maundy means. Do you?
I did. I looked it up.
Okay, all right.
It is the Latin word mandatum, which means commandment.
Okay.
And so this day is famous for the foot washing scene. And at the foot washing scene, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So Maundy Thursday, Command Thursday, highlighting this command in this moment. On Thursday, we also get the Passover meal. We also get the upper room discourse in John 14-17. And then you get the Garden of Gethsemane scene, the night before his betrayal. And you highlighted this Gethsemane scene, especially, let's see here, Matthew 26, verse 39, where he is sweating blood. And he says, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And so just to recap what's been going on, we see this king about to conquer. We're wondering what the enemy is going to be. Is it going to be Rome? Is it going to be the religious elite? What's going to happen? He cleanses the temple. He advocates for the vulnerable on Monday. He confronts these Pharisees that are really just thwarting the law that God had imposed. We get to the tragedy of Spy Wednesday. And throughout this, we've been seeing this thread that God is going to send his son. His son is going to die. And I think that's where I want to stop here and say, like, okay, I can see now why Jesus is sweating blood, because he's facing his own death, essentially. And he asks, like, if there's any possible way, but then he becomes resolute and says, not as I will, but as you will. So one of the conversations I thought interesting, it was off air, it was the road to Emmaus. And this is, again, post-resurrection, and so we're on the other side of it. And Jesus comes to this group, and he opens their eyes, and he says, this is what is written. The Messiah will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. And so there was almost like this expectation that this was the way it was supposed to happen. Could you help us illuminate why the path had to go through the death of Jesus? Like, why did this have to be the way that this went down?
Yeah. I'll start by saying the way that the people experienced that week was such that it would be very out of left field that he ends up dying.
100%. Yeah.
So like, he's making momentum. He's gaining the favor of the people. It's like, man, he seems unstoppable. And even that idea, like, we can't stop him because there's going to be a riot on our hands.
Yeah.
Then he disappears and goes underground, like spending time with his disciples. He's doing his final teachings.
Because this is all private, right?
Now we're in
dynamic
the private
versus public.
He's been living this, right? Which is why Judas is able to say, like, hey, I'll tell you where he is when he's having his private time.
Right.
So he's living privately. And you would almost think, like, based on how the week started, that Jesus and his disciples are kind of circling up to plan how they're going to storm the palace, or storm the place where the Pharisees live, or storm Jerusalem, light it on fire, tear down the thing. Like, it's time for the big revolt. And so it's almost like, oh, this is the calm before the storm. Like, they're going to go hole up in their secret conclave here. Then they're going to come out and they're going to take down the religious empire. But instead, he's pulled out by the authorities, put on the cross, and put to death. And it's like, and if you're reading the week through that lens, you're thinking, oh, they stopped him. Like, he was about to come up and kill them, but he stopped them. But it's interesting. What we see as we look through the narrative is that on one hand, Jesus does have these great indictments about the Jewish religious system is about to come to an end. The temple is about to be destroyed. Like, the world as you know it, the religious world as you know it, is about to end.
Right.
But instead of going straight at the Jewish religious authority, he goes from Jesus' perspective, from our perspective of watching Jesus, he goes at a different enemy. He doesn't go and tackle the temple, tackle the religious authorities. He goes to the cross, and on the cross, he takes on sin. In the grave, he takes on death and Satan. And then on Easter Sunday, he comes out victorious. And so we get to see Jesus actually go to battle. He just goes to battle against a different enemy than we anticipated.
Right.
And yet, as we look over the next, 30, 40, 50 years, all of those things he said do come true. The Jewish religious leadership falls apart. The temple is destroyed. Jerusalem is overtaken. And a new religious system is born through Jesus and his disciples that takes over the whole earth. But I think it feels like this is a big left turn in the week. But really, when we know the plan of Jesus, yes, part of the enemy was the religious system. But that wasn't the enemy he was trying to conquer. That was the enemy who would be replaced when he conquered the real enemy of sin, death, and Satan, and goes after that enemy on Good Friday. So we see him not really making a shift, but it's almost like as Jesus is walking down the road of Holy Week, we see that his face is set not on killing the religious leaders, but killing death and sin itself.
Wow. That's really fascinating, because it's like, it seems like that turn really does highlight who the true enemies are, who the enemies underneath even the surface level humans that are in the places of the religious leaders. Like, there's something deeper going on. And so, it's just really fascinating to think, like, Jesus saw this as the plan, and it's almost like you almost have to reread all of the expectations that all these people had in light of this new enemy. And I feel like that's what a lot of I feel like John does this a lot, but I feel like even the New Testament writers, they will say, okay, I now understand the enemy. Like, let's go back into the Old Testament and really see where that enemy is at play, And all of a sudden it just like illuminates all these different things, like, oh wow, like, this conversation has so many different levels to it. And so it just makes the Bible all that much more like fascinating, I think. So, man, we made it to Maundy Thursday. Anything else on Maundy Thursday that you want to say?
Maundy Thursday. He washes the disciples' feet. Like it is this. I just think you just see Jesus. On one hand, you might feel like he's kind of taking a detour off of the path he was on, but actually he's continuing on that path through, like, he's about to go to war, but not against who he thought he was going to go to war to. And so he's saying goodbye to his friends. Hey, I'll catch you on the other side, And so it's just a reminder he's in control, but he also decides to spend his last time loving and giving the command to love to his disciples, but then B, also setting them up for success. Like, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to, wait in Jerusalem, right? All those different things. Like I will rise again.
It's kind of like that last huddle. So it's like, I think it goes back to even like Palm Sunday, where it's like, okay, he is huddling. He is setting like the game plan. It's just not against the enemy that you would expect.
Yep.
So like, it is kind of interesting to look at the upper room discourse and all these different events, the foot washing event, and like setting the example, and through that lens of like huddling up, getting ready to launch the plan essentially. And
part of it is like the religious, as much as the religious leadership and system was the enemy, there was a deeper, darker enemy behind it, where it's like, he calls them children of Satan in John 9. The sin is what actually is bound these people. They think they're walking under the law, but they're really bound to sin. So it's almost like he knows that if he can go and destroy sin and death itself, there'll be a freedom experienced on the other side of like people who want to follow God aren't going to be bound by sin or Satan anymore, because now sin, Satan, and death have been conquered.
So we made it to Good Friday.
Here we are.
And I don't want to spoil too much, because I really want you guys to go to the Good Friday service. It's like, it's one of my favorite services of the year. Maybe that makes me like darker in nature, because it does take a somber tone. It's almost like a funeral service where everybody's in black, and it kind of takes a different tone than we're used to. But it's obviously anticipation of the celebration that we get to have on Easter Sunday. And so, without diving too much into the details of Good Friday, because I don't want to spoil it for any of our listeners out there, what do you hope people see in the cross as they consider this crowd perspective, this public perspective, this like, oh my goodness, here comes a king. What's he doing now? Like, oh man, he's making enemies of some pretty strong people. It's like, oh no, he just got betrayed. I thought he was going to huddle up and give us this like new game plan of how to conquer all and set up his kingdom, and now he's dead. What do you hope people see in the cross as they approach Good Friday? Like, what do you hope like Holy Week helps people? How do you hope Holy Week illuminates the cross in a new way?
Yeah, I think when we go back to where we started and talk about Jesus as the king on his throne, ruling and reigning over all the earth, one thing that we realize is like he's not really qualified to become king until he conquers the enemy that is currently reigning over the hearts of the people. And so on the cross, we get to see Jesus' true enemy, which was sin and death. On the cross, we also get to see that this is the battle that he's fighting. He's not there because a mistake has happened. Like, he is going through the cross, through the grave to get to the joy set before him. And I think part of what strikes us as we watch this narrative, even in the garden and beyond, is just the loneliness of that moment, where in a world where we're expecting him to gather up an army and go take down Rome or take down the Jewish religious leaders, he doesn't gather an army. In fact, he kind of holes up with his followers, then he leaves most of them, then he takes 3 of them to go pray, then they fall asleep, and then he gets taken off by himself, and then he stands trial. He doesn't try to defend himself, and yet the question he answers affirmatively and is when Pilate says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He said, "It's your words, not mine. Yes, I'm the king of the Jews. So I am the king. These are my people, and I am the king of these people." But in the same way, the cross was the destination he had to get through to conquer the true enemy of sin and death. And so on the cross, we get to see Jesus experiencing the weight of sin, dying a sinner's death. In the long Saturday, we get a picture of Jesus descending to the depths of the grave, taking on the enemy of Satan, releasing the captives who've been held in bondage, and then emerging from the tomb on Easter Sunday. Is I always get this picture of Jesus like David coming up with Goliath's head in his hand or whatever. It's like he just emerged from the battle and he has won. And so it's like, in order for him to emerge from the battle and won, it's almost like through death, he dove into Hades to come out victorious and lead his people towards everlasting life. And now, and only now, after taking on the enemy of sin, Satan, and death, is he qualified to ascend his throne and begin to reign. And so that's what we get to see 40 days later in Acts chapter 1, is Jesus ascends to his heavenly throne, sits down there and begins to reign over all creation.
So what should that, I mean, as we think about our people here at Three Crosses, and it's just like amazing to see the enemy identified, the war being fought on that battlefield of the cross, and then into Hades, and then coming out with like this victorious posture, and it's like, that is so amazing. How does that affect us today? How does that impact Three Crosses Church, followers of Jesus or non-followers of Jesus listening to this? What would you say to them of just like, as they're meditating on Holy Week this week, like what would you want to leave them with?
Yeah, it's almost like we look at the cross and in some way, I'm just going to use these words because they rhyme, and then I'll give you better words. But it's like we get to empathize, and then it should energize. And by empathize, I don't really mean we can empathize with Jesus on the cross. No one has ever died on the cross for the sins of the world. But we have this compassion. Like, it was our sin that held him there. That he didn't just like take a suicide pill and then go and fight Satan in the grave. Like, right. He like died in an excruciating way. Like, the word excruciating is based on like a cruciform death. Yeah. So he died in this terrible, horrible way. He was forsaken by the Father on the cross. We see that the Psalms that he quotes. He carries the weight of the sin of the world. He died a sinner's death. This becomes the stumbling block to the Jewish people as the gospel is being preached. Is like, wait, the Bible says cursed is anyone who hangs on a tree. Like, he's a cursed person. Why would we worship a cursed person? It's like he became a curse to remove the curse of sin that's been on us since the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3. And the curse in that way was lifted because he bore it on himself, that he came into the garden and bore the curse so that it could be lifted from his people. And so that's the empathy part of like just the compassion, the gravity, the mourning that we do, and he died the death that we all deserve for sin, that the world has earned. Even these religious leaders who deserve to be put to death, Jesus was put to death instead. And then he went to work to fight. He came out victorious. And so then that should energize us of like, and then the real work, obviously dying for the sins of the world was the real work, but then the real work continued into the grave where Jesus conquers death, takes down that enemy because the grave couldn't hold him. And that should energize us that our King emerges victorious. But I don't think Good Friday we're supposed to feel energized. I think on Good Friday, that's part of the reason we walk through this weekend one day at a time, is that on Good Friday we're not energized. We just empathize. We feel the weight, the pain, the sadness, the weight of our own sin, and think like, man, in some way I did that. Like whether it's I would be part of the crowd yelling, crucify him, I did that, or it was my sin that held him there, I did that, or I'm one of those who tried to take the vineyard that God had given me and made it my own instead of, I did that. Like, it was my plan that if we could just put this guy to death, we can have the freedom to do whatever we want. Wow. But he willingly went to the cross because his death brings freedom to those who believe. And so I think the weight and pain and compassion of that is what we should feel on Good Friday.
Well, if you've never been, again, a blameless plug for Good Friday service, it's a great service. And so we'd love to see you out there. we'll be up there. And Good Friday service starts at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, Friday night.
Friday night.
Sanctuary.
And we're so excited for this Easter weekend, guys. And we'd love for you to check out the devotionals on this. It helps paint a picture as you're walking through this week and meditating on this week. Any other practices that you'd recommend for this week to just like really get into the vibe of Easter?
No, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things of Holy Week is that as we look at these different passages we talk about, we really just get to walk through it. And so that's I've been doing a daily devotion the last 2 weeks that just is like a pathway to Easter. And so that's part of the heart as I wrote this one. I wanted to make it simple. It's just a few paragraphs and a Bible text to read and something to reflect on. But really just like, let's just live this week. Let's be those spectators. Let's worship him on Palm Sunday. And let's be mesmerized by him on Holy Monday and Tuesday. And let's start wondering and feeling the pain of betrayal on Spy Wednesday and see the beauty of, just his beauty on Maundy Thursday. And let's feel the pain on Good Friday and be discombobulated on Long Saturday, Holy Saturday, whatever you call it. And let's rejoice on Easter Sunday that, Paul says that if the resurrection didn't happen, we should be pitied more than anyone. And he's right, because if Jesus merely died, it would just be a real sad ending to an almost good story. Like that Jesus was supposed to be, this is what they say on the road to Emmaus. We heard that he was the one who was going to restore all of Israel. Like we thought he was going to be big time, but they killed him. And so it's just another victim of the religious authority who squashed what God was trying to do. They killed the son. Now the vineyard is theirs. But Easter Sunday is like, no, they lost. And, it's like almost like after Goliath has been killed by David, the Philistine army knows that they've been beaten and they just start to run. And so it's like, we just get to watch as Jesus ascends to heaven and from his throne in heaven starts to control every aspect of planet Earth, nature, people, circumstances, rulers. It's like, it's over, man. Like he is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and he is ruling and reigning over all the earth, and his kingdom is unstoppable. And it's only true because it's only possible because he's alive. And so that's what we get to experience over the course of this week and weekend.
Man, I'm super excited for this weekend. So Danny, thanks for walking through Holy Week with us. And we hope you engage in whatever resources are out there that are possible for you to access. So whether it's checking out those devotionals or attending one of those services, we'd love to have you guys up here celebrating the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the risen Jesus. So Danny, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, see you soon.